Dear colleagues, I have the great pleasure to welcome you today for this new session of the Channels of Digital Scholarship seminar, the first one for 2024. I want to remind you that the seminar is convened by Maison Française d'Oxford and Digital Scholarship at Oxford. I would like to thank the director of Maison Française d'Oxford, Pascal Marty, for supporting this seminar, and also all my colleagues who co-organize the scientific event. I want to thank Professor David Deroux, the director of the Digital Scholarship at Oxford Initiative, and for his support to this seminar. I have chosen to focus today on generative AI and its impacts on research in higher education. Generative AI, particularly in the field of natural language processing, has shown its remarkable importance for research in higher education. Exemplified by models like ChatGPT, generative AI has changed the literary review process. It gives scholars the ability to explore vast academic databases, automatically extract key concepts, sum up articles, and suggest additional readings. In the context of data analysis, generative AI contributes to the efficiency and interpretation of results. Its large capacity to understand and generate contextually relevant texts enables researchers to formulate hypotheses and provide meaningful interpretations of complex findings. By enhancing the communication of results, generative AI plays a crucial role in making research more accessible to both expert and non-expert audiences. Collaboration in higher education research is often interdisciplinary, especially in digital humanities projects. Generative AI fosters a dynamic, collaborative environment. Through interactive conversations, researchers can use natural language processing models to brainstorm ideas, articulate hypotheses, and receive instant feedback. This promotes effective communication among experts from diverse fields, breaking down barriers and encouraging the exchange of knowledge and perspectives. Additionally, in the realm of academic writing, generative AI supports researchers by providing real-time feedback on writing style, grammar, and overall coherence. For this session today, we will focus on natural language processing technologies such as ChatGPT. I would like to thank our two keynote speakers for today's session. Mélanie Jouitteau from Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique and Niccolò Monti from Université Paris 8 and Università degli Studi di Torino. I will give some information about the format of the session. You will first listen to our first keynote speaker, Mélanie Jouitteau. After her paper, you will be able to react and ask her questions. Afterwards, we will listen to our second keynote speaker, Niccolò Monti. His paper will be followed by your questions. During this Zoom session, I will ask you to mute your microphones during the talks. You could switch them on again if you want to ask questions later on. Of course, you will be able to ask questions either by raising your virtual hands or by typing your questions in the chat window. It is now time for me to introduce our first speaker today, Mélanie Jouitteau. She has been a researcher at Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique since 2007. She is now chargée de recherche at IKER, a research center on Basque texts and language. She has been a fieldwork linguist with a specialization on the formal syntax of Breton and on community-oriented buildings of digital resources in minority language contexts. Her research focuses also on formal linguistics, syntax, natural language processing, open data, open science. She specializes in the study of Breton, and she has published numerous research articles on this topic. She has developed the ARBRES website, which can be regarded as a wikigrammar of Breton dialects, and also a database of annotated sentences. The title of her paper today is Wikigrammars, Resource Building for Low-Resource Languages, an example from ARBRES, Wikigrammar of Breton. Mélanie, we are listening to you.
Thank you, Grégoire. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if, are you in?
That's perfect.
Okay, nice. Okay, so first I'm going to provide you with some context as to how my presentation will articulate with the global topic of that seminar. I'm going to show you a website that I developed since I entered the CNRS, so 2007. This is a Wikigrammar. It's completely open for people to contribute or correct or even just say that something is wrong. And this is a grammar, so I describe all sorts of varieties of the Breton language, mostly with a syntactic eye, of course, because that's where I come from. But the idea is really to gather data in close contact with the community. So for some context, Breton is a Celtic language. It's the only Celtic language that's ever developed with a contact with French, because all the other Celtic languages are spoken by speakers who are bilingual in English, not in French. So we don't have that many resources on the language. And also the sociolinguistic situation in Brittany makes that we don't have a lot of academic resources that we can devote to the study of the Breton language. So I wanted this website to be a research notebook where I could myself write and articulate the products of my research, but also I wanted it to be on the long run. I wanted it to be a resource center for anyone working on the language, because my hope was to facilitate the work of my future colleagues. And I wanted to find colleagues working on Breton with this application. It was the first years of the Wikipedia launch. So of course, I considered using Wiki, and this is a choice that I've never regretted. At the beginning, at the idea of opening completely a research notebook to the community, to anyone really who would want to comment on anything, I was a bit afraid because, well, I didn't want to become I don't know, a webmaster of some forum, but I found that people were really good at being careful to provide quality feedback on what they were reading. On the long run, I find that they are, if anything, they're a bit too shy. Like they would have very good remarks to do, and they would prefer to send me an email for me to change the stuff so that maybe not to commit. I'm not sure why they do it like this, but there is a place in the wiki for more interaction than there is, but all interactions are really meaningful. So it's fully open, you know Wikipedia, so it's the same principle, except that I have I take the responsibility for everything that's on the website. So each page that you're going to see has a discussion page associated to it. There is a full traceability of what we do in it, and we can also observe like this how science is built in real life. So for today, I wanted to, at some point when I'm going to show you the grammar, you're going to think, okay, maybe this is interesting, but this woman is crazy. She's been doing that for 15 years, and there is no way we can tell people to do that for their languages. It's just too much work. And this is where it's very relevant for the topic of this seminar, because the very long process of entering data inside the Wikigrammar just became so much easier with generative AI, and I'm going to show you this. So wait for the point where you're going to think that I'm crazy, and then wait some minutes. I'm going to show you how it's much easier to do now. So the goal of this Wikigrammar is to build a grammar that we humans can read, but also because it's all digital, I want to build in an incremental fashion annotated data that we could send towards our NLP colleagues. So I don't have a specialization in NLP, but I really want to build something so that my work can be sent their way to speed up digital development for the Breton language. So the idea will be to find a way to insert the data for humans to read in a way that would be kind of playful for beginners and useful for language experts. But also we want to annotate the data in the background so that it's usable for machines. So today, in the remaining time we have, we're gonna, well, this is, I should provide you the link of this in the chat already, if you want to speed up at some point. Okay, so you have it. I wanted to go through this with you together, and then we're gonna go navigate a little bit on the website, and then I'm going to show you what we do with some NLP colleagues with the data that we extracted from the Wikigrammar. So first we're going to see some numbers for you to have an idea of the size of what we are seeing. Then I'm going to detail the goals of the ARBRES website, just going by the profile of the readers. We're going to see some means to reach these goals, what the website provides, and then we're going to enter the core of the idea of the concept, if you want, by looking at how an example is built. All right, ready? Let's go. So some numbers. I'm going to put you people on the left. Cool. So the ARBRES website is developed since 15 years now. It now receives about 100 human visits per day. Usually I show beautiful Google Analytics figures of how humans visit the website, but they change their way to calculate so that I cannot compare now from this year to the past year. How people went on the website, but it's about 100 human visits a day, and I can kind of guess by looking at where they enter in the website and from what page to what page, where they navigate. I kind of guess what they're looking for and if they found it or not. So I do that regularly to have a kind of feedback of the users of the website. Globally, geographically, it's used mostly by the places where people speak Breton and the places of the diaspora, nothing surprising. But also because it's a resource on formal syntax that's written in French, it's also used by a lot of universities in Quebec or Belgique or Switzerland. And I can guess it because I have much more connections at the time of the exams, and they go directly to the formal stuff and not really the Breton specialties. So inside the website, at the start of the year now, we have about 10,000 pages, but that's not all content pages. So we have almost 5,000 pages of content, which means 19 pages of presentation. That's all the meta stuff, how to use the website, etc. We are in one of them. And the rest is a battery of redirection pages, because like in Wikipedia, when you look for something, there is a tunnel of redirections that put you in the right page. And it's going to be a very useful way to manage the different orthographies of Breton. There is in all a bit more than 3,000 articles on different elements of the Breton grammar, but this includes pages that concern one verb or one noun. And about 300 theoretical explanation sheets. That would be pages on what is agreement, what is binding, with examples, with Breton examples illustrating those like linguistic classes. So it organizes now about 15,000 original Breton sentences. They are glosed and translated into French. And I take the data from different sources. First, of course, there is all the research works that me or my colleague publish. So if there has been at some point in history an article that claimed something about Breton syntax, it should be referenced into this Breton grammar, and the data should be reported and discussed. I take also the Breton sentences from different corpora produced by native speakers, novels, newspaper articles, sometimes songs or more specialized form like this, but mostly novels. And also because I work as a generativist, I work with elicitation data. I go on the field and I build protocols to go ask people about what they think is grammatical or ungrammatical in a sentence. And I write the raw results of these elicitations on the website. When I say raw, it's kind of haha, because for the moment on the website, I have only written the results of the elicitations. I have recorded them for me to not forget what they were saying. But for most of the elicitations I did, I don't have the right to distribute them more freely. So the raw data here means that I write down what they told me, but the voice, I don't have the right to distribute. I'm trying to shift that now to more open access, real raw spoken data, but it's not that easy. So it's coming, but it's not already there. And anyway, I would distribute it on Cocoon or on different archives that people can access, not inside the Wikigrammar. All right. Goals of the ARBRES website. The goals is to put together and to work for 3 different types of people at the same time. So first, for speakers and experts of the language. So when I write something, the way I conceive the grammar has to be a pedagogical resource for workers of the Breton language. I want it to be a collaborative social experimentation organized around a highly endangered language. And this is not a light thing to say, because I didn't tell you about the numbers of the language, but there is an estimation going around that we are about 200,000 speakers of the Breton language. That is, people declaring that they do use Breton on a daily basis, or that they could. It means that there is less practice in that. And also you can count that among those 200,000, a lot of us are quite old. So if we start counting people that would be below 55, for example, then the estimation falls down to 15,000. So this is very particular, the situation for language. This means that in order to go ask people about really weird sentences that I need them to judge for me, to do my work as a syntactician, I need a lot of things before I arrive into the kitchen of someone and ask them weird questions with two quantifiers and a negation. There is some work around that in order for the data to emerge like this. So I want this website to be part of this work. Like if I go ask stuff to people, I write down the raw data for it to be available and for me to keep a trace of it. But I also give them the link of the raw data. And some of them don't really care, but some of them go through the data and they provide more feedback. And also they have some power on what is published from their work, even under the raw form that it has. And I can keep the scientific part of it kind of intact, because once it's on the web, I have full traceability of what we do of the data after that. So if we decide at some point that one sentence has to go because, for example, the speaker doesn't recognize the sentence as grammatical anymore or something like that, well, I obey and we take it away, but the website will keep the trace of this operation. So scientifically speaking, it's interesting. I want it to be a resource of material for classic linguistic questions. Like if people have a question about agreement systems in Celtic languages, I want this website to be a resource for them. But I want also people who teach themselves the language to be able to use it. And that's not that easy, because when you write for those two types of people, well, you have to think of it a little bit. Finally, for the users that are closest to the community, I like to use the website as a ready-to-use sheet that's ready for social media. Like we have a lot of classic debates in the Breton language, like how to say such and such, or how to call native speakers, what is a native speaker, etc. And I want people to be able to discuss that in the way they want, even if sometimes I find it a bit violent, but I want that they can express whatever they want with a possibility to have access to scientific input on what they are saying. So when I see that there is a debate that's a bit heated, and when I see that it could be helped somehow by some scientific input, I just have to post a link once the page is done. I wanted to be a tool also for my colleagues, of course, for descriptive and theoretical linguists. I want it to be an accurate and theoretically informed description of Breton syntactic microvariation. So inside the website, standard Breton is considered like just one dialect among the others, and I just report what I see is possible or not in such and such dialect. I want it to be a permanent, up-to-date, state-of-the-art of current linguistic researchers. I want it to be a source of linguistic expertise on the theoretical productions on Breton, and an active international research tool. For example, I propose to colleagues to go collect data for them in the field. And then I write down on the elicitation center the raw results of the protocol. And after that, they can use it for their own work. And on my side, I use it to enrich the grammar with questions that I wouldn't have raised myself. And finally, for language technology developers, I want it to be a ready-to-use database of richly annotated data on a low-resource language. I want it to be a resource for usable digital resources on Breton. So there is a page that's about all the digital resources we have on Breton, with a full history of what we ever did, what is open access online, etc. Also, I want it to be a source of language expertise on available Breton material. And I can comment a bit on that later when we see the examples. So that's all very good ideas, but how can we provide that exactly? Well, first there is the grammar. I provide two different entrances inside the grammar. One for learners, speakers, and philology teachers, in this table of content, you would find basic descriptions, and I try to use words that are not too unpleasant for non-linguists to manipulate. And I have a second entrance that I call formal grammar, and there you can find more, I don't know, academically articulated ways of describing the language. There is, of course, the internal research facilities like a research toolbox, like that you can search in different languages. It's just above here. So if in English you look for agreement, you're gonna have a page that's proposed to you, and you arrive on Système d'accord, because once again, this is in French and it's done for people who are bilingual in French. But you can, yeah, I made it searchable in English for my colleagues. All right, so back to the page. There is a glossary of Breton, French, and English terms that we use, but it's not really important for you. More importantly, for colleagues to start working on Breton, there is a list of other abbreviations, symbols, and acronyms that we use in the field. For example, if a Breton person or linguist tells you, well, linguists are persons, but I found such and such in an NLBB or in the ALBB, you wouldn't know what it's about, of course. But here, all the acronyms will be resolved by a system of redirections so that you find the full reference. So if you type ALBB here, you're directly redirected toward the reference of this atlas. Each reference page in the website is categorized, and when I can, I provide editorial history, anything I can find on this reference that one would need to work on it should be here. So here it's an atlas. I copied the list of entries. And then, of course, you can click on the word and find the page of the grammar that tells you about this word. So here it's just a word that means animal. So there won't be much about syntax, but you will have, if it's done right, there should be here anything we know about the variation of this word across languages, across the dialects, where it's found or not, how it's pronounced, etc. And you find an example at the beginning where the example is, where the noun, sorry, is found in context. Let's go back to the examples with glosses in English. That's going to be easier to show. I see time running, so I want to show you how we build the examples. Yeah, each page of the grammar, if it's fully developed, should contain a section on morphology, a section on syntax, semantics, diachrony, typology, like comparison with close languages, Gallo or French or other Celtic languages, or more distant languages typologically speaking. And if there is a reference that addressed or mentioned this element, it should be in the bibliography. So now we still have some minutes. So I want to show you how we how we build the examples inside that. So look at what we have in one. That's typically an example we would find in the grammar, except that I gave you the glosses in English for the purpose of the presentation. So you have first, well, a number that's to provide a reference of the sentence in the text, so not very interesting. After that, you have the first line, which is in Breton. De bleheta fel dites kasven. Here. De bleheta fel dites kasven. And then here you have the full translation of the sentence. Where then do you want me to send you? Now, between the two, you have a translation that's word by word, the gloss. So we start the sentence with da. It's translated by to. And if I click here, I find myself in the page of the grammar that describes this preposition, right? So I'll push the back button to go back to the example. After that, we have a little one in superscript. That's annoying. It's not really easy to read. People don't like that, but I'm obliged to do that because it's a Celtic language and we have Celtic mutations. What does it mean? It means that the word that follows is not beler. If I was to pronounce it in isolation, it would start with a P, not a B. So if I click on where here, it would send me to the page that's called peler. And that's because the preposition before triggers a lenition on the initial of the following word. The P goes to B, and it's the result of this consonant mutation that I code one here in superscript. If I click on the one superscript, I find a full definition of this consonant mutation. Still inconvenient for the learners, but well, that's something we cannot go around when we learn Breton. It's always really funny when we start teaching Breton to someone and we have to tell them, oh, by the way, if you encounter a word that you don't know, you cannot look for it in the dictionary because you don't know the first letter of it. It's like this. It's a language. So we have this system of glosses then that directs us towards the lemma, towards the form of the element in isolation, okay? So now let's have a look at how we code it. How do we do inside the website for it to show up like this? So here is our sentence. So we find it again. De blerta fel die descasven. We have the translation here. Where then do you want me to send you? And we have the full code of what we had to write for it to be clickable in the way that I just showed you. So we find here, when we were on the reader page, you were reading only to, because that's the gloss for the preposition da. When I clicked on it, it sent us to the page that was called da, right? Likewise, under beler, what we read where was sending us what's on to the page like it's written on the left, peler, because that's the form of the element in isolation. And then here we had the clickable superscript for the lenition, right? I don't see a lot of cameras open, but I see I'm losing some of you. I'm sorry. Snoopy? Yep, no, I don't. Okay, so that's the way we code the examples for them to be clickable and usable for the readers. Now there is a way, because all the examples are presented in the same way inside the grammar, there is a way to extract all that and to organize these notations in a Convenor format. So I'm going to show you this. Hop. Here, we are not in the Wikigrammar anymore. We are in the GitHub of Autogram, which is an INR program of research that's led by Sylvain Cahan at Université Paris 3, Nanterre, in the lab Modico with some people of the INRIA. And since 2 years now, they perfectionate with some master students. This year it's Yingzi Liu and Yidi Huang. And they perfectionate the way to extract all those examples from the Breton Wikigrammar in order to build, how you call that, a tree bank of universal dependencies. So in order to do that, we need to organize the annotations. So I found you inside what they extracted. I found you the same sentence that we've been looking at so far. So you find again the Breton sentence, de Bleretafeldites Kasfen, the translation. Now it's in French because all this all this group of colleagues, we work in French. Here you have a mention of the dialect that was mentioned on the website, mention of the location, the precise village where the speaker was from, precise reference of the source of the corpus. And then you see in red here, the same sentence written from up to down, all right? Each word is associated now a full line. That's place for much more information than we had on my website. But what you see here is already annotations that we automatically extracted from the website. From the notation, we guessed that the lemma, the isolated form, was da. So this is important for stuff like Belair, because this is the mutated form. And we already know that if we had to look for it in a dictionary, it would be at Peler. We extracted automatically this, that's taken from the categorization of the pages. So the page that's called Peler in the website is categorized as interrogative. So automatically we can know that this is an interrogative. The same for the blue column. And we started already to fill in some of the dashes that are missing that are still missing information with, for example, T, line 7. We know that it's singular, the second person, etc., and a pronoun. We have the gloss that's repercuted here. Pour, ou, dont, plaît, à toi. So that's the glosses in French, of course. And what's missing now in order to finish the tree bank is all the, I see that time is running. Should I close here?
That's okay. You can have I would say 10 more minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. So the information that's still missing is the relationships, the syntactic relationships between all those elements. So we want to know, in order to build a tree bank, we want to know that Belair is the object of Da. And we want to know the syntactic organization of the entire sentence. So in order to build that, they have a wonderful tool, which is called ARBRES. So let me show you that. So sorry, I couldn't find the same sentence. So I will have to bother you with another sentence in Breton. So Pipi, it's the name of someone. Pipi nos gorzaien is. It means, so Pipi, this person, particle, has a breast that's easy, and it means it's someone that drinks a lot. So il a la dalle en pente in French, repeat. You can, with this arburator group, you can draw the dependencies like this. See how easy that is? I just take one of imagine I don't want it to be the root, so I can click on it and choose for another relationship. I can take this one and decide that it has an object here. And then I just click like object, where would that be? I didn't do that since a little bit of time. Well, whatever, it's just demonstration. If I was to decide that it's a cleft, off, I just did it. It's very easy to do. So the existence of this tool made it much more easy to go annotate the dashes that we still have here. Do you see it? Well, it makes it much more easy. What we still have to do is to annotate like manually. We have to annotate like this about 50 sentences, and then we can train a parser to start doing it automatically, because we have 15,000 sentences inside the database, and of course nobody wants to do that manually. So now, if we go back to the way I built the wiki tables, that's the place, that's the thing that changed the most in the past year. Building such a wiki table it takes a lot of time. I do it since a long time, so I can be quite fast at doing it, but it's really long. You have to build the columns and be very consistent in what you do, etc. Now, what I do since ChatGPT, say, I open a corpus in Breton. I copy paste a sentence. This is from this is a master thesis from Jean Guérec. He has just sent it to me this morning. So let's see if we could integrate one of those sentences of standard Breton inside. I go to ChatGPT and I have very basic prompting. There's like nothing complicated. You are a Breton specialist and a linguist. Your task is to annotate sentences in Breton in a wiki table, to translate them in French, like in the examples that follow. And then I have provided it with 7 examples of Breton sentences with their reference and the way I want it to be ordered. I go copy paste my Breton sentence at the end. Enregistrer, soumettre. And here we are. This is much slower than usual. Okay, so let's see what it did. Garnet onbit varmes e fin penkenta on ugenvit convit. So that's okay. I just have to check that because sometimes it would change the original sentence, but it's rare and it didn't do it this time. Now let's have a look at the coding it did. So that is the right, it guessed the right lemma here. It's not providing me with the morphological decomposition that I do on the website between for past participles, but linguistically this is correct what he's saying. This is a correct notation for a ranig, but that's not what he's seeing because this is the verb be, so that would be to be corrected. This is wrong. This is not good. This is correct. It's a good guess from ChatGPT. It's just not the way I write it on the website. Var is correct. That is correct. Yeah, that is correct. At and yeah, the rest is correct. That's a correct guessing of the morphological decomposition of yem in 20e, so a good ordinal. and convet siècle, perfect. Ganeton bevarmez et fin pen kentaunigen vet convet, je suis né à la campagne au début du XXe siècle. Perfect translation, really amazing. This is GPT-4, by the way. 3.5 was really good at making the pretty tables, but the translation was a bit worse. And the way to reference and make it clickable is also perfect. So you see the acceleration of the work that it means for me. Yeah, I can stop here. I have more if you want, but I prefer to exchange with you.
Thank you very much, Mélanie, for this brilliant presentation and very, very complex on Breton language. I'm sure there will be questions, so feel free to ask questions.
If there aren't questions from the public, I had a small one, just a curiosity. But thanks for the presentation, very interesting. And I wasn't aware of all this work being done with Breton language. I'm not a linguist, of course. I come from semiotics, and I specialize in the history and the use of techniques in literary studies, especially. And I was wondering if you had come across any use or any attempt at building any neural network architecture specifically for Breton or any other sort of linguistic analysis, which is directed at a certain specific language and not to use a general purpose neural network like ChatGPT, and whether you deem it more useful if you come across these types of neural networks.
Maybe a part of the question I didn't hear. Just tell me if my answer is irrelevant, okay? I will restart like ChatGPT. Just click refresh if my answer is not relevant. Loïc Grosbol at the University of Paris 3 has trained a BERT model on the available data of the Breton language last year, and it was to build an automatic translator. That's not how we say it in English. A translation tool. So it worked quite well, and he used the aligned data that is inside the Wikigrammar in order to enrich the tool and the training. And we found that even though it's difficult to provide a quantification of how good this data is, it looks like the fact that the data has been gathered by a linguist with I always want to have the more diversity possible in the data. So if you train a neural network on that type of data, it's not live data. If there is a counterexample on a generalization, I will put it inside my data. So it's like concentrate of diversity of the language. I use all orthographies and all dialectal variations I want them to be inside. So we found that it had a positive effect on the training, even though it proved difficult to quantify.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mélanie. Mathilde has a question in the chat.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is more regarding your wiki on the Breton language. Since it is inspired by Wikipedia and the whole Wikimedia way of doing science together, I was wondering if you were aware of the Lingua Libre project and whether you at one point maybe had were planning to maybe add some audio data to your website. For instance, here the words that can be clicked to go to their grammatical description. Maybe it could also be possible to hear them or to hear the whole sentence or something similar. I don't know if it's something you've considered.
It's a very good idea, and you're absolutely not the first person to suggest that. Over the years, it's the most recurrent comment I have. For the sentence that you have here, that I showed it to you, it would not be possible because it's a novel, so it's written data. We don't have the audio that goes with it. Now,
the idea would be to have it maybe in a list of words or sentences that could be read on Lingua Libre and get the data from Lingua Libre. Well,
for the use inside the website, there is a sentence, a full sentence. I want it to be perfect. There is no way we're gonna. We have speech synthesis in Breton.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. I don't want people to click on a pronunciation of this sentence that would not be correct and that would not be correct for this specific dialect. But for a lot of data, I could think of it ahead and try to favor the data for which I could have audio. And there is no denial that for the learners, it would be extremely, extremely good.
Yeah, and actually in Lingua Libre, you can specify where you speak from. And I guess that could be an indication of the specific variety you're speaking and why you're pronouncing things a specific way, or whether you have an accent or something like that. So you can see it actually on many Wiktionary pages now, and also on some Wikipedia pages.
Yeah,
so just an idea.
I do know of that, and I also do know that for my grammar, it would be a dramatic improvement to have at least at the beginning of each article at least one pronunciation.
Exactly, and you can choose which one you want. The data is completely open. You can go in.
It's completely open, but the level of quality that I provide.
Yeah, but you can select which one you want.
Data on Lingua Libre, because when you see an example on the Wikigrammar like this, I went to check that this person was a native.
Oh, I think you can also.
I mean, to use the data in a scientific manner, I really need to know that. Now, on the other side, and for the digital development of the Breton language, we do need transcriptions of oral data, and I'm not neglecting that. I'm just saying that integrating it directly into the Wikigrammar is not that easy. But we do know that we have to increase the mass of transcriptions that we have. So if I can show you something.
Yeah, sure. And also you can some contributors indicate whether the language they are contributing to is their native language. So you can also, and how many other languages they speak. They give a few information, not all of them, of course, which is kind of a problem, but yeah, you have that information as well. Okay.
This is a collaboration with Gueltas Duval-Guénoc and Philippe Arguard for the interface. Gueltas Duval-Guénoc has developed Anauder, and it's a speech recognition tool that works with neural networks. It works on a small sized set of data. So for the moment, it helps us transcribe. When I have an elicitation file to transcribe, it saves me about a third of the time that I used to spend on it before. So it's very easy to use. You just go like this. Oh yeah, it's assimile of Breton, so that's very easy sentences. It should work. You push on transcribe.
Okay, so you select an audio file and it transcribes automatically. But I guess not all varieties of Breton are supported.
It's better and better with the time as we feed it with more data.
Yeah.
But for the moment, it's not a good transcription, very far from it. Here, actually, the result is not that bad, but it's because it's the assimile. So
yeah, exactly. It's very clean data and a very standard speech, I guess.
If I use it with two speakers, old speakers of different traditional dialects in the kitchen, that's going to be bad. But if I had pushed the ERF button in order to get an ELAN ready file, it would save me a lot of time, even by just cutting the periods where people speak. So I'm just saying, it's getting better. We know we need more audio data, but integrating it into the Wikigrammar for the moment, I don't see an easy way, even though I know that it would be very good for the speakers. So that's my shortcoming.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I understand the question, and thank you for it.
We have two more questions in the chat, and then we will listen to our second speaker, Athena.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. The work and preparation from a distance, it looks extensive and very impressive. And I had a question concerning the GPT query. In the demonstration, I noticed that it was, there were several regenerations. And I think it was up to, in the same thread, it had maybe been over 100 times. And I was wondering if the regeneration was due to the errors, maybe there was a dissatisfaction in the response that was given, or maybe it's a different thread entirely. It wasn't specified. So I was curious to know if there was a regeneration due to dissatisfaction in the answer. And so my implicit question with that is also about your satisfaction of the responses that are given by GPT-4 here, or you had mentioned 3.5 and how the translation into French was not sufficient. And I suppose that is now improved with 4, but in terms of the efficiency and the precision of the model, what is your overall satisfaction with that? And final question, when you entered the prompt, you provided several examples of how you wanted the response to be formatted. And using GPT and playing around with the prompts myself, I maybe would give it 1 or 2 examples, but I noticed that you had given it 7, or you mentioned that you had given 7 examples. And I'm wondering the number of examples that are given in sort of training training GPT for the response. Is that something that you have found to be more efficient than having just 1 or 2 examples?
Yeah, definitely. I stopped at 7 because it started giving correct results, but before it's like it was distracted, like really like a small child going, I would rather draw. And when I reached 7 shots, it started giving more persistent answers. Now, for the number that you see here, It's just me being lazy because I don't want to copy paste the prompt each time. So I just push on modify, and then I just change that and the reference of the, so that I keep the same prompt all the time. So it just means that regenerations, it's not that I never do it, it's very rare. Because maybe I don't trust the thingy once it's done a mistake. I just don't trust it to do better. I used on the about hundreds I did that there. Maybe I regenerated like 2 or 3 times, but I don't use it a lot.
Interesting. And would you say that you're generally satisfied with the results that you're getting, or I mean, I'm sure it increases the it decreases the amount of time that you would have to spend on each example. But then with the mistake in the example that in the demonstration that you had, there were, I think, 3 mistakes that that you would want to go back and correct. So then the idea, I suppose, is to keep the format and then maybe go in and manually correct the 3 points that that you are dissatisfied with.
Yeah, 3.5 was good at giving pretty tables, but it was really bad at overall translations. Number 4 is a lot better. It's not perfect. I cannot trust it. So that's consistent with what we see with ChatGPT in general. And I'm in contact with some people in OpenAI to try and make it better. So I hope it's on its way to improvement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will take the last question. Frederick?
Thank you very much for the nice presentation. And I have only 2 questions here to raise. One is with regard to the language itself of Breton. As you are all aware, any language in A has this characteristic that it is born, it lives, and it dies. And we have seen, what I say, that languages normally are just like human beings. They are born, they live, they die.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen this in many countries. Good example is in Africa, where there are many languages now they are dying. In a particular example, I could cite Tanzania, where I am coming from. We have more than 150 languages, but they are dying now. We are remaining with only one, which is Kiswahili. Now, my question was, why are you sensitizing or making sure that Britain is not dying, which is something which is natural, and perhaps the young generation is not backing the language? That is one. 2, I would like to know now the corpus needed in your work, for instance, the translation work, so that translation from Britain to French and vice versa can be of high quality. You have talked about 15 sentences already, 15,000 sentences that you have used. So I'm curious enough to know how much now the corpus is needed for us to have quality translation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. These are very good questions. For the first, it's the biggest one, and I will make the smallest answer. I'm a linguist. I'm not saving languages. I don't put in my head that I'm saving a language. Okay. I'm not even sure what it would mean for one human to save a language, because languages are between humans, and we need humans to give them their brain to grow on. And that's not, I'm not going to take the brains of people around me for languages to grow inside, all right? Everybody has to make their own choice as to where they put their brain. Now, what I can do as a linguist is, and as a researcher, and also I'm paid by the citizens of the French state to do this work of linguistics for them. So I think it's my duty to have a look at what's happening. And there is a technology boom that's happening with neural networks. We will see a lot of changes in our lives in how we use languages. And I do think that the languages that will not be compatible with this new technology will face greater risks of disappearance that they ever risked in the 20th century. And we know in the French state and also in Africa that languages can die. So I take it as my duty to do whatever I can, possibly if I can, I will try to make it in a clever way, to make it better. Now, for translation, what is the threshold of quality data we need in order to have to develop good tools? It's still, there is not one answer to that. But what we know is that we need first a mass of data, even monolingual. Like if you have a good Wikipedia, it's a very good start, because you have a huge, you can have a huge amount of monolingual data in the language. And also you need an aligned corpus of sentences that are translated with good quality at the beginning. And if you have a good quality small set of data, then you can imagine clever things to go take on the web what you find that's maybe lesser quality and try improve it from the quality set you have. If I can just provide a link for you to explore maybe. This is a website that we developed with the Modico people from Paris 3. I will give it to you in the chat so that you can open it. If I can. Yeah. It's an inventory of the languages in the French state, and for each language, like for example, Breton, because we talked about it. So for each language, we describe its vitality with respect to the criteria of the UNESCO and also the linguistic resources that are available for research, but also we provide at the end synthesis of all the corpus and tools, digital tools that are available for developers. So I would recommend having that for your language in a form where the community can say what is quality data and what is not. And also you can write to me if you want to chat more about this, because I think this is very important.
It's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much, Mélanie, once again for your presentation.
You all. Thank you for the questions.
Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Niccolò Monti. He is a PhD student in semiotics at Université Paris and at Università di Torino. He studies computational creativity. He has written on death in digital social platforms, on individuality in semiotics, and also on post-war literary criticism and writing in Italy. The title of his paper today is There a Machine in This Class? The Ideology of Linguistic Automation. Now the floor is yours, Niccolò.
Okay, there, I've activated the microphone. Thanks, Grégoire, for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. My presentation will take a bit of a turn towards the historical more than towards the linguistic and the technical. My studies are more focused, of course, my background is in semiotics, but I'm very focused right now on the intersection between literary theory and literary criticism and the history of techniques and science, and specifically of all the, so to speak, historical relations that go from cybernetics into AI, and in general within what I wanted to define as the ideology of linguistic automation. Of course, I'm not, so to speak, alone in calling it an ideology, and that's where the historical outlook that I wanted to propose comes from. I wanted to take a first step with a paper that was published in 1964 by the American philosopher of techniques and historian of technology, Lewis Mumford. If the slides help me. There we go. Titled The Automation of Technology. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Lewis Mumford. He grew to be a bit of a techno-pessimist, so to speak. And in his paper specifically, he lamented the fact that in general higher education already in the 1960s, the issue of automation, the introduction of mechanizing tools, of machines, in general, the introduction of tools that could automate not only the acquisition of knowledge, but the organization of knowledge, were, in his eyes, worrying, in a sense. And that's why he was, I think, among the first to define automation, not only, of course, as a moment within the development of industrial and civilization, of industrial technologies within manufacture, but also an ideology that was affecting the way in which universities, in which knowledge, in which research and education, in which in general our perception of, so to speak, human creativity, human creative faculties were being shaped by these automatic tools. So he was a bit of a techno-pessimist, and he defined automation, again, as a sort of scientific ideology. And I will come back to that definition. He said in this paper, this is a small quotation that I wanted to introduce to start with, to get a sense of what Lewis Mumford was lamenting and was observing through this paper. Most of our fellow citizens, unless they are threatened with the loss of their jobs, are not ready to question the inevitability of eventual total automation. Of course, it was the 1960s, the, so to speak, critical and social political imagination was already filled with the perspective of a society with so many machines that can do the work of men, that the image of total automation, to which we've grown so much accustomed with as things that in the political philosophy, in the economical spectrum, worries us, and at the same time makes us wonder what we could do with a completely automated society. Already in the 1960s, it was something that was worrying philosophers and researchers alike in the field of the history of technology. And again, the question here lies in how many human faculties, how many human functions, how many human tasks are we willing to automate in order to speed our work, to facilitate what we can do, or just for sheer fascination, what of the, so to speak, limits, or the limits of automation. To what limits can we push productivity thanks to these machines? And this is what, of course, I'm not going to read the whole quotation here to save some time. But of course, what worried here Lewis Mumford was the fact that, again, on one side, already in the 1960s, there was a rampant push towards automation that seemed, in his eyes, somewhat ideological, meaning that it concealed certain economical, industrial interests that risked, in his eyes, to hamper the fact that certain human faculties could be entirely substituted by machines, but could be automated. And again, his conclusion was, of course, the necessity, the ultimate necessity to refute, to say no to knowledge automation. It was a bit, again, extremely pessimist in his perspective. But I think historically it offers us a perspective, a very useful perspective for days, for our current situation and relationship with automatic technologies, with how this is not a today problem, but something that has developed through the last century, through the last 60 decades at least. So first of all, I wanted to do a little detour and define what is precisely a scientific ideology and why is it useful for us to speak of automation, of course, also not only as a technical possibility, but as well as a scientific ideology. And here I'm taking from another philosopher of science and techniques, the French epistemologist Georges Canguilhem, who in Idéologie et Rationalité tried to define a term that, again, already in the 60s and 70s in the philosophy of science of those years was circulating much, and he tried to understand how do we distinguish what a proper scientific endeavor from a scientific, so to speak, discourse with ideological properties, with ideological, so to speak, purposes. So again, and he said that a scientific ideology, like, for example, a political class ideology, is not to be seen as a false consciousness, nor is it to be seen as false science per se. He said that the assertion of a false science can never be falsified, hence false science on one hand, as no history is not falsifiable. By contrast, we can view a scientific discourse with ideological qualities, with having a historical foundation, with having a historical, so to speak, emergence, and having the, so to speak, historical institutionality to be analyzed and criticized, and to actually exert a pragmatic effect on the social circumstances in which it emerges. He, of course, his main example was connected to the 1800s biological discourse, and, for example, to the evolutionary theories of Herbert Spencer, which were driven by a push to describe the whole of society as having evolutionarily, so which led to what is known as social Darwinism, as to a view of society intrinsically, where the ideology of that kind of evolutionism was embedded into that social description, that hierarchic social description. So we have automation today as not only a scientific ideology, again, but as something that stretches, of course, as a discourse across several decades, across several fields as well. I wanted to just pinpoint certain examples that I think are fundamental in order to understand, to get a full picture of what we're dealing with here, and what are, I think, the, so to speak, origin points, the points of emergence, where this kind of discourse, where this problem, this epistemological problem, this technical problem, that is automation, became relevant for the history of technology. And this is another, of course, extremely important character in the history of cybernetics and AI, John von Neumann, who in I think a paper from 1955 titled "Can We Survive Technology?", which was mainly, of course, aimed at discussing the danger of atomic research in those years, as in a small paragraph within this paper, he also ventured to discuss the risks, the perspective, the problem of automation per se. Say that also likely, together with atomic energy, the atomic danger, likely to evolve fast, and quite apart, again, from nuclear evolution, is automation. Automatic control, of course, is as old as the Industrial Revolution, even though, of course, the proper term automation, I think it has been dated at around the 1940s and 50s itself. Whereas, of course, the problem as being connected to its industrial circumstances, of course, it dates back at least to the discussions that were being had in England since the 1830s, of course, with Charles Babbage, with Andrew Ore, with the discussion of how do we introduce, how can we automate our industries, our manufacturers, our factories, and where does it lead us to? And of course, again, the problem of automation is, again, a technical one, but one it also mobilizes in the public discussion, again, between also the engineers and mathematicians that were discussing it, that mobilizes some sort of humanistic preoccupation. The fact that these technicians, these historians, these cyberneticians were worrying not only of the concrete possibility of automation, they were not only discussing the pragmatic fact of automation, the effectuation thereof, but of course, as well, the moral, the social, the political implication of automation already in those years. Again, of course, the cornerstone of economic and social discussion of automation has to be attributed to another social critic of those years, whose name was Friedrich Pollock, associated with the Frankfurt School of Social Criticism, who in 1957, between 1956 and 1957, penned what is known in the, at least economic literature, as the foundational study of automation as a social problem, not only as a technical problem. And again, of course, he mentioned greatly the works of cyberneticians that already in those years were pushing the discussion, the technical discussion of automation. And here we find probably one of the first proper definition, theoretical definition of what do we think of when we say automation. In general, we think of a technique of production, the object of which is to replace men by machines in operating and directing machines, as well as in controlling the output of the products that are being manufactured. So here, automation, whereas in the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century was only seen as something that would have affected the manufacture, the production of objects, now people were starting to discuss, of course, another sort of automation, the one that would have affected the, so to speak, intellectual tasks, the parts of controlling the output, of controlling the machines, even of managing the machines themselves, as the machines were, it was being seen as a possibility that their automaticity would lead to the construction of machines capable of, so to speak, what already in the 19th century was called mental labor. And again, this is what, again, to clarify certain fixed points, automation, of course, becomes a problem since the rise of cybernetics, around the time which Pollock wrote his work on automation. But it has evolved across the decades, and with the, of course, since at least the first instances of what is now known as machine learning, with the invention, with the first design of the perceptron in the 1950s, and with the development of more and more complex neural network systems capable of automatizing not only what was first seen as the scope of automation, the automatization of manual labor, but capable of automatizing mental labor. Again, this is a problem that historically can be retraced all the way back to the works of Charles Babbage, who in his works on the economy of manufacture talked effectively of mental labor as a part of the process of automation, of one of the things that could be automated in order to remove some of the weight of work, of labor, from the hands and from the minds of the workers, and from the hands and minds of the managers themselves. So we have a bit of a roller coaster history, going from the rise of cybernetics within the United States and within, in general, the Anglophone world, and with the first explicit idealization that that automatic machines could not only be developed in order to, again, to replace manual labor, but as well to replace mental labor. And we have, at least since the later decades of the 19th century, and with more scientific so to speak, dedication from the half of the 20th, a specific set of research endeavors that were focused on a, so to speak, specific mental kind of labor, the linguistic labor. From at least the mid-1950s and even before that, with the first machine translation being designed and built in the 1940s and 50s, we have the proper beginning of, again, the acquisition from the ideology of automation of the fact that machines could not only be used, again, for manual labor or mental labor in general, for intellectual faculties, but specifically to automate linguistic tasks and the production of language itself as a form of labor. So we move to the current situation. Of course, I'm sorry for the cavalcade, but it brings us to discuss the current situation, seen once we know that background, what led us here. Of course, I jumped a bit from the 1950s, 60s to today without considering the 70s, the development of some first symbolic AI and then proper machine learning in the 80s and 90s. But right now we are in a point in the history of technology in which that kind of idea that linguistic automation was a theoretical and primitively technical possibility is now being experimented through general purpose machines like, for example, large language models, of which, of course, ChatGPT is, I think, today in all these iterations, all these and all the other transformers of that family, one of the most famous of examples. This paper by Giorgio Franceschelli and Niccolò Monti, which of course is a preprint, unfortunately, was, I think, one of the, I think encapsulates, both in the sense that it tries to describe historically and theoretically where we are at in the discussion of in the public and industrial discussion, of course, of why do we think that these large language models can reproduce certain characteristics of our mental labor, of our linguistic ability, namely, and this is the one of the focuses of my research, the fact that we think that through these technologies, certain traits of what we deem being the characteristics of human creativity can be reproduced. For example, a paper that also Franceschelli and Musolesi quote in their paper by Margaret Bowden, who is a computer scientist who has taken a keen interest in the last decades in the problem of the, so to speak, automatization of creativity, said that at this point in time, we can be certain that those creative, so to speak, faculties that are seen as combinatorial, therefore as those types of creativity that do not innovate but combine the elements, can recreate different combination of pre-existing elements, or those types of creativity that she names exploratory, namely that they can venture within a already known space with they can add certain new knowledge to a pre-known, so to speak, epistemic space. We are not at that level at which these technologies can reproduce what she calls transformational creative traits, namely those that, so to speak, paradigmatically shift a whole field of knowledge. But nonetheless, so we seem confident, Bowden and as well Franceschelli and Musolesi argue that these models, these AI technologies, can reproduce at least the first two types of creativity. And they can, of course, do that in a realm of linguistic creativity pretty confidently. And I'm going to skip the quick explanation of what is probably it will be understood as linguistic creativity. Of course, I wanted to veer from the idea, the Saussurean idea, that linguistic creativity is bound to the use, to the creation of analogies, a notion that is found within the Cours de linguistique, to the idea, to the Chomskyan idea that to define linguistic creativity is to define a faculty that is rule-bounded, but without veering too much into this proper definition. And also considering how much time I have left, I wanted to delve, seeing again the historical background and the current situation in how we deem that these technologies can reproduce these creative human faculties. I wanted to explore 3 different settings in which these specific technologies are being implemented. And again, to jump again a bit back and forth between an historical background, therefore a, so to speak, a past of these technologies, where these technologies first emerge in these 3 settings, and offering some examples of the, again, the current situation in which large language models are affecting these 3 settings, namely those of education, research, and specifically the latter one, which is the one in which I'm more focused with my own research, with my own studies, writing specifically, literary writing. So the first one I want to delve into is the one of education, of course, which is not, again, as with automation in general, only related to a, so to speak, now problem. Again, in 1959, we have behavioral psychologist Skinner, who in a very condensed paper called named the Teaching Machines, which I think can be found in a book called Automation and Society, which in those years kind of offered a general picture of the possibilities of automation at large in different realms of society. Again, Skinner offered, I think, one of the first perspectives into how we could and why we should implement, again, the why we should utterance. I think the way in which it emerges within Skinner's discourse, I think, really elicits this, the suspicion that we are really dealing in this case with a scientific ideology, with the fact that this discourse was trying, the discourse that we should, again, automate certain tasks, was not presenting itself as merely descriptive, but as well as prescriptive in a way. And again, Skinner was one of the first to envision that we should revision the classroom practices by means of mechanical and electronic devices. And specifically, he was interested in the possibility of using these machines in reinforcement learning. And I'm quoting here from a small passage from this paper. The simple fact is that as a mere reinforcing mechanism, the teacher is out of date, which might seem even nowadays paradoxical to define a human teacher, a person, as obsolete. If the teacher is to take advantage of recent advances in the study of learning, she, and they really use the word she and not a more neutral pronoun, of course, but those were the days, must have the help of mechanical devices. And here we have a first example of within this scientific ideology, within this scientific this discourse related to automation, we have a first example of the possibility, not only, of course, of full replacement of the complete substitution of the teacher, but at least of the creation of auxiliary positions for machines. The mechanical device here becomes, within the field of education, not only a tool for the teacher to use, but something that has to be coupled with the teacher, is auxiliary, again, and not only to be used and manipulated by the teacher. And of course, Skinner was here imagining actually the use of automatic learning systems that the students themselves could use in order to learn unmediated by the presence of a teacher, which of course then had a role in this image, in this picture, but nonetheless kind of hampered, or at least minorly replaced by the presence of these machines. Then to move, and this is actually a point in which I was kind of curious to introduce also a bit of a discussion related to the case of Wikipedia, not only in relation to the fact that nowadays we think of the use of Wikipedia in education and research as a given, but as something that is part actually of that same, again, automation as an ideology, meaning that within Wikipedia itself, within the formation, within the way in which that kind of knowledge is, of course, moderated and edited and formatted, we have to consider the presence of different actors within that, within Wikipedia itself, so to speak. We have to consider the lives of bots. We have to consider the presence of automatic agents that format and even fully edit certain pages. And we have to consider nowadays how to, again, socially and morally discuss the fact that within education, certain certain contents that we deem knowledge and that we deem usable for education purposes are effectively automatically generated. And here I'm taking a quotation, and it is important to consider it in the sense that it intersects the fact that education and the fact that it is being so to speak, invaded by the use of automatic technologies. It impinges on how citizenship itself, the fact that we form people, we form citizens with these kinds of technologies as well, is affected. And here a researcher from Sweden, I think, Ram, as one of the best perspectives on this problem. And I want to quote again from a work that right now currently is tackling this very issue. Education is used to govern technological progress and citizens' preparedness and attitudes towards it. Socio-technical imaginaries of the digital are thereby a motor for civic education, and digitalization is more than a logic for technology-driven modernity. It is also an educational governance fundamental to training proper and propitious citizens for the future. And again, the whole picture, I think, given by the, so to speak, tripartite factors of education, automation, and citizenship, the fact that these technologies not only affect the way in which education directly shapes how we acquire and how we perceive knowledge, but how in general it affects the formation of social individuals. I think it has to be considered as a within the educational setting as being something that can not only be acquired as a given, again, not only in the case of Wikipedia, but in general, but as something that can be socially criticized and has to be historically grounded to be properly understood in a way it is changing our educational practices. And again, I think for the sake of time, I'm going to skip this part of more related to research here. I'm going to take a deep dive into how, as well in literary research, from at least the rise of digital methods and quantitative analysis with this paper by literary critic Franco Moretti, The Slaughterhouse of Literature, the fact that when we are we're confronted with large corpora of texts, these automatic tools come to our help more often than not. And the introduction of statistical and automatic methods has really helped and propelled forward the literary criticism. But I'm going to jump forward. And again, of course, within the field, the setting of research, we have to consider as well how these mechanisms, these automatic technologies have affected the way in which we interpret the text, not only the way in which we quantitatively analyze them, but the way in which we then qualitatively interpret the texts. I wanted to focus just on the research part. I'm sorry if I have skimmed a little bit through the slides, but I wanted to focus on this last one, which I think is the one that encapsulates best what is being changed within the scientific, within the research setting, is the fact that the introduction of these technologies as automatic helpers, so to speak, and this is a perspective that is being debated within the philosophy of science and techniques, changes the way in which the production and attribution of ideas is being perceived, not only in the more prosaic sense. For example, I think some months ago, a paper was published in a biological journal, and one of the authors to which the paper was attributed to was actually ChatGPT. How do we cope with, how do we confront the fact that an automatic machine, an automatic, again, a large language model, if it has contributed to the production of a certain knowledge within a certain field, is it a tool anymore, or has it evolved into a sort of co-authorial figure? The question might seem a bit naive in a sense, but it is something that in the philosophy of science has been posed at least since the rise of the computer, as not only a tool within the laboratory, but as a tool that not only, again, helped the researcher, but changed the way the researcher researched, changed the practice of the research. And again, question of authoriality can at least can be here attributed to the work of philosopher of science Isabelle Sterngère from the 1990s, which again becomes even more evident and even more of a preoccupation for philosophers of science and techniques alike today. And I'm here quoting from a paper by David Leslie on the title, Does the Sun Rise for ChatGPT, which elicits another side of this preoccupation. It may be rightly said, I'm quoting here, that the sun does not rise for ChatGPT or any other generative AI system, because such models do not, even in a charitable sense, have access to the meaning of the words sun or horizon or world, or for that matter, a rudimentary capacity for sense-making, theorization, interpretation, or truth. We have therefore an epistemological problem here, which comes from a technical one, the fact that even though we have the sensation, even though it has become common practice to include these automatic technologies within the practice of researchers, the technical limitation, the fact that these technologies do not have, of course, an experiential knowledge of the world as the researchers have, poses a sort of, again, a conundrum. The fact that how do we then use these technologies? What are the limits that we have to impose on ourselves on the related to the use of these technologies, for example, in the discovery of scientific ideas? The last part was a bit of a coda to the whole, again, historical discussion and philosophical discussion to the ideology of automation that I wanted to propose here today, more related to my own field of study, which is, again, literary theory and literary history, and the study of electronic literary text. So when we entered this realm, this third setting, once we've asked ourselves, how have these automatic technologies changed the way in which we perceive and conceive of educational practices or research practices? The third, and I think the one I'm more interested in, and the one I think it has actually more consequences for not only literature, but for the overall perception of writing as a practice, of writing as a language-producing practice. The fact that when we enter this field, the use of electronic media, of electronic technologies, has really, since at least the 1950s and 60s, shifted the way in which literary writing has been perceived and studied and even produced. here I wanted just to quote from a, again, foundational work by critic Catherine Hales, Writing Machines from 2002, in which she recounts some sort of fictional version of herself coming from the studies, from computer science studies, and encountering for the first time, and then they're returning to literary studies, and at the crossroad of these two disciplines meeting, encountering the possibility that through the use of computers, you could actually enjoy or even produce literature that computers, since at least, again, the 60s and 70s, were becoming not only an addition to the work of informaticians, of scientists, of researchers, but as something that even, so to speak, people that create with words were actually employing within their practices. And here she wonders, what are the effects of these technologies to the act of creation itself, to the fact that the not only production of scientific idea, but the production of an artistic idea can be altered by the fact that I'm not only possibly using a computer to express it or to produce it, but the fact that a computer might eventually even substitute or replace the person that creates, that writes, per se. And I wanted to present just two examples, but for the sake of time, I think I'm going to cut the whole explanation, but I encourage you to read at least these two works of literature that were, in this case, one of the first ones to experiment with the use of an IBM 701 computer in 1961 to produce a work of poetry that was not the sole work of the poet, but a collaborational work between the poet, between the writer and the computer, which worked through the composition of different variations of these snippets that the poet had prepared for the IBM computer, and then traduced in punch card holes, magnetic cards. A more recent example, which I wanted to present to you, and I think I have not had time to discuss it, is of course Ross Goodwin's One Row, which is a work from 2018, which has experimented with the use of convolutional neural networks for the composition of an actually aesthetically pleasing and interesting kind of weird work of literature. So to end this, a bit of a cavalcade through these three settings, I thank you for the attention, and I hope to have given at least some interesting points, either of discussion or of further interest for you in what I think is the historical background and the current interests in the ideology of automation. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niccolò. This fascinating presentation, very rich, and of course, it was just an outlook of a very large subject, as we can imagine. We'll have, I would say, about 5 minutes for questions. Who would like to start? Athena?
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. Very passionate, and you've touched on so many different things that are all intriguing. And I wanted to come back to a question that you asked concerning. You said that it may be a naive question, and I find it very interesting to reflect on it. Automation, has it become a sort of authoritative voice? And it made me think immediately of normalization. And so when you're using the LLMs, obviously they're trained on millions and millions of words, and they're large data sets, but it doesn't mean that there's no bias that goes into the LLM. There's no sort of normalization that can be produced as a result of the training that is done. And so that made me think of that. And so through that normalization, could that potentially lead to what we could consider as an authoritative voice or an entity that speaks on a certain behalf?
I think surely we can. And I think the normalization in that sense derives, of course, from the fact that there are a lot of biases, a lot of lackings in the training and the formation of the data set. And I think the main interest in the research, especially in the literary field, being done with these technologies is the fact that it's all in the database. The issues all come from the training, from the construction, from the preparation of the data set. And I think a philosophical concept that has been used a lot to describe this, so to speak, effect of normalization is the idea that all knowledge has a grammar, like language. All knowledge has a sort of set of rules, has a set of, it can be codified in a certain way. The language, the knowledge that is stored and that is tagged and grouped within the architecture of a neural network has, of course, its own grammar. Therefore, it provides a grammar for the knowledge that then it either contributes or that it automatically produces for then the research to interpret. Therefore, there is certainly a sort of normalization process in the sense that then even the production, the interpretation of the ideas that the researcher might be throwing at the LLM can be then, so to speak, flattened on the production, on the grammar on which the LLM is being constructed. So I think I wanted to say that it is a naive question related to the author reality, because I think per se it is kind of naive to consider an LLM as a possibly an author per se, but I think the problem of normalization is really present, and it has not only epistemic, but I think also political consequences.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to Niccolò? Probably a last question. So I was myself particularly interested in the question of authoriality, especially which is a very relevant question as far as generative AI is concerned. I'm sure probably I will organize another session on this topic. So the link between authoriality and generative AI, linked, of course, to research and also to the way of writing is produced. But unfortunately, we won't have time today to delve into this question, but I'm sure it will be of interest for another topic, for another session. And I would be glad to invite you again if you want to come again, Niccolò.
Surely, thanks. Sorry if I took so much of the time of the session.
Thank you.
But thanks for the question again.
Thank you. So I think I will soon conclude, unless there is another short question. Frederick.
Maybe it may be a general question to any of the presenters, that AI is making people not being critical thinkers. I don't know whether this is true, especially the young generation now. They're using a lot of this ChatGPT, and therefore they are reluctant. They don't even want to use their brain really in education. What is your take?
I think more than a question of hampering the development of critical thinking, I think it could be said that they do not probably help with that. But I think with a proper education in the, so to speak, in media literacy, in technological literacy, inserted within the educational curriculum, I think it could help students and teachers alike to use these tools in a manner that, so to speak, empowers or helps or contributes through, even in the case, for example, it is the closest to my research, to the production of prose, for example, within the curriculum of or English studies. If a teacher has to, for example, ask the class to produce a text in English prose, are we willing to accept the fact that some of these students or all of these students could produce their text with the aid of a large language model. Or we could teach how to use in an interesting way one of these machines for the production of creative prose. In that case, I think it is all in the way in which the pre-existing technology that we use, since of course the teacher does not have the possibility to create just for the sake of education their own large language model for education purposes, but I think it's all in the way in which the that pre-existing knowledge is of course used and again critically grounded in its own history, in its own political implications. It's not neutral, of course, if we use ChatGPT. We can use it properly if we know how to criticize it, of course.
Thank you. So once again, I want to thank our two keynote speakers, Mélanie and Niccolò, for today's session. The next session of the seminar, Channels of Digital Scholarship, will take place on the 29th of February. It will also be an online event with Zoom, and the title will be Ethics of AI in Digital Scholarship. Thank you so much to everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you all. Thank you, Grégoire.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent session.
Have a nice evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Richard. Goodbye, Andrew. Goodbye, Frederic.
Goodbye, Grégoire. Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much. That was
much.
great.
Thank you.